Power is a dangerous drug, especially in the hands of the wrong man with a badge. When an arrogant officer violently tasered a compliant black driver during a routine stop, he thought he was untouchable. He didn't know the man bleeding on the asphalt was a federal agent. The air in Westford County on the night of August 14th was thick with humidity and the low hum of cicadas. For Officer Bradley Jenkins, a 9-year veteran of the local police department, it was just another graveyard shift. Jenkins was a man who wore his badge like a crown. He was notoriously heavy-handed, leading the department in use of force complaints. Yet somehow, he had always managed to slither out of disciplinary action. He knew how to write a report. He knew the buzzwords, furtive movements, feared for my life, refused to comply. Riding shotgun that night was Tyler Owens, a 23-year-old rookie fresh out of the academy. Owens was still idealistic, eager to serve the community, but he was quickly learning that riding with Jenkins meant keeping your mouth shut and your head down. Jenkins had a reputation for turning minor infractions into felony arrests, viewing the citizens of Westford not as people to protect, but as subjects to dominate. At 11:42 p.m., a black, unmarked Chevrolet Tahoe drove past their cruiser on Interstate 85. Behind the wheel of that Tahoe was Daniel Ross. Daniel was a 42-year-old supervisory special agent with the FBI, operating out of the regional field office. He had just wrapped up a grueling 14-hour undercover surveillance operation targeting a mid-level narcotics syndicate. He was exhausted. His tie was loosened, his suit jacket resting on the passenger seat, and all he wanted was to get back to his wife, Sarah, and their golden retriever. He was driving exactly the speed limit, his hands resting comfortably at the 10 and 2 position. Jenkins's eyes narrowed as the Tahoe passed. "Look at this guy," he muttered, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Late model SUV, out-of-state plates, driving a little too perfectly. Probably moving weight." "He's doing 65, Brad," Owens pointed out nervously, glancing at the radar. "Exactly the limit." "Exactly," Jenkins sneered, pulling the cruiser onto the highway and accelerating to close the gap. "Nobody drives exactly the speed limit at midnight unless they're trying not to get pulled over. Let's light him up." Jenkins tailed the Tahoe for 3 miles, waiting for the slightest mistake. Daniel, noticing the cruiser riding his bumper, remained perfectly calm. As an FBI agent, he knew exactly what the local cop was doing. He signaled properly, changed lanes to let the cruiser pass, and maintained his speed. Frustrated by the lack of a genuine violation, Jenkins decided to manufacture one. He flipped on the siren and the flashing red and blue lights. "Failure to maintain lane," he barked into the radio, calling in the stop. Plate reads, Charlie, Delta, Niner. Inside the Tahoe, Daniel sighed heavily. He pulled over safely onto the wide shoulder, shifted the car into park, rolled down all 4 windows, standard procedure to ensure the officers felt safe, and placed his hands firmly on the top of the steering wheel. He knew the drill. Being a black man driving a nice car late at night in a predominantly white county, he had been subjected to fishing expeditions before, long before he carried a federal badge. In the cruiser, Jenkins unclipped his holster. "Stay here, Boot," he told Owens. "Watch how it's done." Jenkins approached the Tahoe with the aggressive, wide-stanced swagger of a man looking for a fight. He didn't stop slightly behind the driver's window, the standard tactical position. He walked right up to the door, shining his heavy maglite directly into Daniel's eyes, blinding him. License, registration, and proof of insurance. "Now," Jenkins demanded, skipping the standard greeting entirely. Daniel squinted against the blinding beam. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my wallet in my back right pocket. The registration is in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" His tone was calm, measured, and professional. It was the tone of a man trained in high-stakes hostage negotiations. But to Bradley Jenkins, that calmness felt like a challenge. Jenkins was used to fear. He thrived on it. When a citizen didn't cower, his ego perceived it as an act of aggression. "I said, give me your ID, boy. Are you deaf?" Jenkins snapped, his voice rising in volume. Daniel's jaw tightened at the slur, but his hands remained glued to the wheel. "Officer, I am perfectly willing to provide my identification. I am informing you of where it is, so there are no misunderstandings when I reach for it. I am also carrying a concealed, department-issued firearm on my right hip. Standard protocol dictated that when an individual declares a firearm, the officer should ask them to step out of the vehicle or calmly instruct them not to reach for it. Instead, Jenkins reacted as if a bomb had just gone off. "Gun! He's got a gun!" Jenkins screamed, immediately drawing his Glock 19 and pointing it inches from Daniel's face. "Keep your hands on the wheel. If you twitch, I will blow your head off. Do you understand me?" In the cruiser, Rookie Owens's heart dropped into his stomach. He scrambled out of the car, drawing his own weapon, unsure of what had just escalated the situation from a routine stop to a life-or-death standoff. "My hands are on the wheel, officer," Daniel said, his voice remarkably steady despite the barrel of a gun shaking violently between his eyes. "I am a federal agent. My credentials are in my left breast pocket inside my jacket on the passenger seat. You can verify this." "Shut up! Shut your mouth!" Jenkins roared, entirely consumed by his own adrenaline and power trip. He didn't hear the words "federal agent," or if he did, he didn't care. He had his suspect, he had his narrative. "Open the door with your left hand. Do it now." Daniel moved with agonizing slowness. He reached with his left hand, unlatched the door, and pushed it open. "Step out. Keep your hands where I can see them," Jenkins ordered, taking a step back but keeping his weapon trained on Daniel's chest. Daniel stepped out onto the asphalt. He was a tall man, imposing in stature but completely unthreatening in his posture. He stood with his legs spread slightly, hands raised high in the air. "Turn around and get on your knees," Jenkins commanded. "Officer, please listen to me." Daniel tried again, turning his head slightly to speak over his shoulder. "I am Supervisory Special Agent Daniel Ross, FBI. If you just check my jacket." "I told you to shut up!" Jenkins was losing control of the scene, entirely due to his own actions. He holstered his firearm and grabbed his yellow X26 taser. He didn't want to shoot this man. That meant endless paperwork and an internal investigation. But he wanted to punish him. He wanted to break that calm, authoritative composure. "Get on your knees or I will tase you." Rookie Owens, standing a few feet away, finally found his voice. "Brad, wait. He said he's an agent." "Quiet, Owens," Jenkins yelled. Daniel slowly began to lower himself to his knees, his hands still raised. "I am complying," Daniel said loudly, ensuring the cruiser's dashcam microphone would pick up his words clearly. "I am on my knees. I am not resisting." But compliance was never the goal for Bradley Jenkins. Domination was. As Daniel's right knee touched the ground, Jenkins stepped forward and, without warning or justification, pulled the trigger on the taser. Crack, crack, crack. 50,000 volts of electricity ripped through the twin wires, burying the metal prongs deep into Daniel's back. The shock was instantaneous and agonizing. Daniel's muscles locked up entirely. His body went completely rigid, and he pitched forward, his face slamming brutally into the hard asphalt of the highway shoulder. He couldn't brace his fall. The sickening sound of bone hitting pavement echoed in the humid night air. Blood immediately began to pool around Daniel's face, dark against the grey stone. "Stop resisting! Put your hands behind your back!" Jenkins screamed, performing the theatrics he had perfected over the years. He dropped a heavy knee onto the back of Daniel's neck, pinning the incapacitated, bleeding man to the ground. He grabbed Daniel's arms, twisting them painfully behind his back, and clamped the steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists, locking them down to the bone. Daniel lay there, gasping for air, his nervous system resetting from the violent electrical shock. The right side of his face was scraped raw, his nose broken from the fall. Blood dripped down his chin onto his ruined shirt. "Think you're smart? Think you can talk back to me?" Jenkins mocked, panting heavily. He grabbed Daniel by the collar and hauled him to a seated position against the side of the Tahoe. "Let's see what you're hiding, big guy." Jenkins began to aggressively pat Daniel down. He found the Glock 19 on his hip, noting the specialized holster. He tossed it onto the hood of his cruiser. Then, remembering Daniel's earlier words, Jenkins leaned into the Tahoe and grabbed the suit jacket resting on the passenger seat. Owens walked over, his face pale, staring at the bleeding man on the ground. "Brad, he didn't do anything. He was getting on his knees." He was tensing up. He was about to lunge, Jenkins lied effortlessly, already writing the police report in his head. Jenkins rifled through the pockets of the suit jacket. His fingers brushed against a heavy leather wallet in the inside breast pocket. He pulled it out and flipped it open under the glare of the police cruiser's headlights. Time seemed to stop. The crickets faded into a ringing silence. Staring back at Bradley Jenkins was a gold badge. And not just any badge. The distinct commanding seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Next to it was a laminated identification card. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Daniel A. Ross, Supervisory Special Agent. Jenkins felt the blood drain from his face. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He looked from the ID card to the man bleeding on the asphalt. The man who was currently staring up at him with cold, terrifyingly calm eyes. "You," Jenkins stammered, the bravado evaporating instantly. Owens looked over Jenkins's shoulder and gasped. "Oh my God, Brad, he's a Fed. You just tasered an FBI agent." Panic, pure and unadulterated, seized Jenkins. For a brief second, he considered unlocking the cuffs, apologizing profusely, calling an ambulance, and begging for mercy. But the narcissism that had defined his career violently rejected that idea. If he admitted fault now, his career was over. The FBI didn't play games with local cops who assaulted their agents. He would face federal charges. He would lose his pension. He might go to jail. In a split second, Jenkins made a decision that would seal his fate forever. He decided to double down. "He's a fake," Jenkins said, his voice trembling slightly before he forced it to harden. "It's a fake badge. Guys impersonate cops all the time to move drugs." "Brad, you can't be serious," Owens pleaded, stepping back. "Look at the seal. Look at his gun. That's a federal issue. We need to call Captain Henderson." "We are calling nobody," Jenkins snapped. shoving the leather wallet deep into his own cargo pocket, hiding the evidence. This guy is a suspect. He resisted arrest. He made furtive movements toward his waistband. That's the story. We're taking him to county. Daniel, spitting blood onto the pavement, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, raspy, but laced with a lethal promise. "You just threw your life away, Officer Jenkins," Daniel whispered, having read the man's name tag. "Every camera is rolling, the dash cam, your body cam, and the federal dash cam running silently in my vehicle, directly linked to the cloud servers at the J. Edgar Hoover building." Jenkins froze. He slowly turned his head to look at the front windshield of the Tahoe. Hidden behind the rearview mirror was a small, blinking green light. Instead of surrendering, Jenkins's self-preservation instinct mutated into pure malice. He walked over to his cruiser, leaned in, and manually ripped the wiring out of his own dash cam. Then he turned to Owens, his eyes wild and desperate. "Turn your body cam off, Tyler. Right now, or you're going down with me." Tyler Owens stood frozen on the asphalt, the harsh glare of the cruiser's light bar washing over his pale face. The young rookie was staring at a precipice. On one side lay his career, his loyalty to his training officer, and the thin blue line. On the other side was a bleeding man, a federal badge, and the sickening realization that he had just watched a felony assault under the color of law. "I said, turn it off, Tyler," Jenkins barked, his hand hovering dangerously close to his holstered weapon. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. Trembling, Owens reached up and double-tapped the center of his chest rig. The small red recording light blinked out. "Good," Jenkins breathed, his chest heaving as the adrenaline mutated into frantic damage control. He grabbed Daniel by the collar of his ruined shirt, dragging the handcuffed FBI agent toward the back of the squad car. Daniel's legs dragged along the pavement, but he offered no physical resistance. He was playing the long game. He knew that any struggle, any sudden movement, would be the excuse Jenkins needed to unholster his firearm again. Jenkins shoved Daniel into the hard plastic back seat of the cruiser, slamming the door shut. He then walked back to the Tahoe, reached inside, and aggressively yanked the key from the ignition, killing the engine and the headlights. He didn't notice that the small green light behind the rearview mirror, powered by a secondary, tamper-proof internal battery, kept blinking steadily. "We're taking him to county," Jenkins told Owens, storming back to the driver's seat. "You keep your mouth shut. I write the report." He was erratic, driving under the influence of narcotics, resisted a lawful order, and reached for his waistband. "The badge is a prop he bought online. You got it?" Owens just swallowed hard and nodded, staring out the passenger window into the black night. The 20-minute drive to the Westford County Jail was suffocatingly silent. In the back, Daniel leaned his head against the reinforced glass, fighting through the pounding concussion and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He focused his mind on his team back at the regional field office. Protocol dictated that if a covert unit went dark or deviated from a geo-fenced route without radioing in, an alert was triggered. At 12:15 a.m., inside the heavily encrypted communications center of the FBI regional field office, an alarm flashed amber on the primary dispatch monitor. Supervisory Special Agent William Sullivan, a grizzled 20-year veteran of the Bureau, set his coffee down. "What do we have, Peterson?" Tech Agent Chloe Peterson's fingers flew across her mechanical keyboard. "It's Daniel's vehicle, Tahoe, Unit 49er. It stopped dead on the shoulder of Interstate 85 20 minutes ago. No radio check, engine killed." "Pull the internal feed," Sullivan ordered, his tone instantly shifting from relaxed to razor-sharp. "Accessing cloud server now," Peterson said. A moment later, a high-definition video feed popped up on the main screen. It was the silent feed from the Tahoe's dash cam. Sullivan and 3 other agents watched in stunned, horrified silence as the footage played out. They saw the aggressive stop. They saw Daniel comply. They saw the blinding flashlight, the raised hands, and the horrifying jolt of the taser that sent their supervisor face first into the asphalt. "Son of a bitch," Sullivan whispered, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the desk. He watched Jenkins rip the dashcam wire from the cruiser, entirely unaware he was starring in a high-definition federal broadcast. "He thinks he just ghosted us." "GPS shows the Tahoe is stationary," Peterson reported, her voice tight with anger. "But Daniel's biometrics, his smartwatch is pinging moving. He's in the back of the cruiser, heading toward the Westford County precinct." Sullivan didn't hesitate. He picked up the secure red phone on his desk. "Get me the SAC, wake him up, then mobilize the hostage rescue team and every field agent in the building. A local cop just took one of our own hostage." Meanwhile, at the Westford County Jail, Jenkins marched a bleeding, handcuffed Daniel to the booking desk. Sergeant Miller, a tired desk officer nearing retirement, looked up from his paperwork and frowned at the mess. "Rough night, Brad?" Miller asked, eyeing the blood dripping from Daniel's nose onto the linoleum floor. Suspect was combative, high on something, Jenkins lied smoothly, slamming Daniel's fake leather prop wallet onto the counter, carefully hiding the actual FBI badge in his own cargo pocket. "Book him for resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and impersonating a federal agent." Daniel stood perfectly still. He looked Sergeant Miller dead in the eye. "Sergeant, my name is Daniel Ross. I am a supervisory special agent with the FBI. The officer standing next to you has stolen my federal credentials, assaulted me, and is currently committing a federal felony. I demand you contact Captain Henderson immediately." Jenkins laughed, a forced, ugly sound. "Listen to this guy. He's out of his mind. Book him, Miller." Miller hesitated. He looked at Jenkins, then at the calm, authoritative posture of the bruised man in cuffs. "Brad, you sure about this?" "Do your job, Miller," Jenkins snapped. Before Miller could type a single letter into the booking system, the heavy steel doors of the precinct's front entrance violently blew open. The sound was like a thunderclap. 24 heavily armed federal agents, clad in tactical Kevlar and carrying customized M4 carbines, flooded into the lobby of the Westford County precinct. They moved with terrifying synchronized precision, fanning out and securing every exit, hallway and sightline in less than 10 seconds. The local cops in the precinct froze, their hands hovering near their sidearms, utterly paralyzed by the overwhelming show of force. "Federal agents, nobody moves! Hands off your weapons!" A voice boomed over a bullhorn. Through the sea of tactical gear walked ASAC. William Sullivan, his face a mask of cold, concentrated fury. Beside him was Special Agent in Charge Richard Dawson, the highest-ranking federal law enforcement officer in the state. Sergeant Miller slowly raised his hands in the air, stepping back from the booking desk. Jenkins stood frozen, his arrogant sneer melting into an expression of sheer, unadulterated terror. Rookie Tyler Owens, standing by the water cooler, immediately dropped to his knees and put his hands on his head, tears streaming down his face. Sullivan walked directly up to Jenkins, ignoring the local cop completely, and looked at Daniel. "You good, Dave?" Sullivan asked quietly. "I've been better, Bill," Daniel replied, his voice raspy. "My nose is broken, and my wrists are a little tight." Sullivan turned his gaze to Jenkins. It was the look of a predator locking onto its prey. "Unlock him, now." Jenkins' hands shook so violently he could barely retrieve the handcuff keys from his belt. He fumbled with the lock, the metallic click echoing loudly in the dead, silent room. The cuffs fell away, and Daniel rubbed his raw, bleeding wrists. What is the meaning of this?" Captain Henderson, the precinct commander, finally stammered, emerging from his back office in a panic. "You can't just storm my precinct." "Shut your mouth, Captain," S.A.C. Dawson interrupted, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "One of your men just kidnapped and assaulted a federal agent. We are taking jurisdiction over this precinct until the scene is secure." Jenkins swallowed hard, trying to summon one last desperate lie. He was resisting. He reached for his waistband. "I have it all in my report." "Your report is a piece of fiction, Bradley," Sullivan said, stepping into Jenkins's personal space. "And your dashcam might be broken, but ours wasn't." Sullivan pulled a high-resolution tablet from his vest and hit play. The volume was turned all the way up. The entire precinct watched in stunned silence as the crystal-clear footage from Daniel's Tahoe played out. They heard Daniel politely state his identity. They saw Jenkins draw his weapon on a compliant man, and they saw the horrific, unjustified taser deployment that smashed Daniel's face into the pavement. The silence that followed the video was deafening. Captain Henderson looked at Jenkins with utter disgust, stepping entirely away from him. "Officer Bradley Jenkins," Sullivan said, his voice ringing out like a judge delivering a death sentence. "You are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault on a federal officer, evidence tampering, and kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Jenkins gasped, his knees buckling slightly. "You moved a federal agent against his will under false pretenses," Dawson clarified coldly. "That's a Title 18, Section 1201 violation. You're looking at a minimum of 20 years. Two tactical agents stepped forward, grabbing Jenkins roughly by the arms. They didn't bother being gentle. They spun him around, slamming him against the very booking desk he had tried to use to ruin Daniel's life. The sound of heavy federal steel ratcheting around Jenkins's wrists was the loudest sound he had ever heard. "Check his right cargo pocket," Daniel said, speaking up for the first time since the cavalry arrived. An agent reached into Jenkins's pocket and pulled out the stolen leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal the gold FBI badge. The physical evidence of the cover-up was absolute. As they frog-marched Jenkins out of the precinct, the arrogant bully who had terrorized Westford County for 9 years was sobbing. The power he had wielded so recklessly had vanished in an instant, replaced by the crushing weight of the federal justice system. The wheels of justice ground Bradley Jenkins into dust. Because of the indisputable video evidence and the high-profile nature of the victim, there was no plea deal offered to Jenkins. The Department of Justice made an example out of him. During the trial, his defense attorney tried to argue fear and protocol, but it fell apart the moment Tyler Owens took the stand. Owens, who had fully cooperated with the FBI from the moment they raided the precinct, testified to Jenkins's fabricated charges, his threat to force Owens to turn off his body cam, and his history of planting evidence. Owens was fired from the force, but avoiding prison time was his own hard-won blessing. He received 2 years of probation. 6 months after the incident, Federal Judge Arthur Pendleton banged his gavel in a packed courtroom. He looked down at a broken, hollowed-out Bradley Jenkins. "You were entrusted with a badge to protect the public," Judge Pendleton stated sternly. "Instead, you used it as a weapon to terrorize those you deemed beneath you. Your arrogance blinded you to the law, and today, the law answers back." Bradley Jenkins was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison at USP Atlanta, a maximum security facility. Because it was a federal sentence, there was no possibility of parole. Daniel Ross recovered from his injuries. The scars on his face faded, though a small ridge remained where his nose had been broken. He continued to serve with distinction, ultimately earning a promotion to assistant special agent in charge. He never sought vengeance. He let the system do its work. But every so often, when he drove past Westford County on a dark highway, he would feel a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that the predator who once prowled that road was locked securely behind federal steel, exactly where he belonged. Karma doesn't always miss. Sometimes it wears a federal badge. What started as an ego trip for a corrupt cop ended with a one-way ticket to a concrete cell, proving that no one is above